Good evening, everybody. Jody said he got Scotty last time, so it was my turn. Scotty said he liked that, so I guess I'll like it next time. So, just want to welcome everybody out to the house of the Lord. Again, I always like to say it's a day that the Lord's made. I think sometimes we forget that. We have circumstances and things with work or just life in general sometimes. And, I was talking to somebody I hadn't seen them a long time. I've probably been over 20 years, I guess, or so. And I saw them in line to getting a prescription at Food City, and we just got to talking. And it was one of my old youth pastors, and he said, "You used to come hang out at my house all the time." And I said, "Well, sometimes life gets in the way a little bit." And, that happens a lot of times. When we forget on a day-to-day basis, sometimes we forget how blessed we are. We forget how much God's done for us just to give us the breath of life or to give us the health to get out of the bed. And we sometimes allow life to get in the way of that. So we're blessed to be here tonight. We're blessed with all we've had today. So we're just going to go before the Lord in prayer. So I just want to open up if anybody's got any spoken prayer requests tonight. Yeah, if you didn't hear Jody, just remember our pastor and his family. They've been traveling for Brother Don's service, but then they're traveling up north, I'm sure, for Emma. So let's remember them, but let's also remember Pam and the Gillette family. I think, again, it's, Brother Don, I know he's dancing and rejoicing right now and having a big time, but the void that he leaves behind, I'm sure, will be felt for many, many years. So let's remember the Gillette family, too. Would there be others? Remember Brother Scotty, he's got a doctor's appointment and having some health issues.
My sister Teresa asked me to request prayer for Mr. Sawkins. He's having got 3 treatments of radiation starting tomorrow. Him and his wife are real close to common family, and they're in New York. They live in Florida, but he's starting radiation treatments tomorrow. And Teresa just asked me her next before left this evening to request prayer for Mr. Sawkins.
Let's remember that tonight, Mr. Sawkins. Prayer for the treatments.
Sean, let's remember the people in Buchanan County that was flooded out, lost their homes. So, I'm thankful for this church. There's a lot of people here going over there and doing work.
Yeah.
I think that's great. That's a good image for this church as well as a good image for God's work and what God can do for people.
Yeah.
And also, we all, I think, I may be a little bit preliminary, but we all need to stop and think about what's going on in this world. I noticed this morning that throughout the world, we've got high temperatures just about everywhere you could think. And we got it all over this United States, but it's also in all the other countries. So God may be trying to get our eyes up.
May be trying to give people a warning about the heat. Absolutely.
Brother Sean, we had a prayer chain this evening. I believe it was Louise's grandson was going to have a light run down. Yes. So let's remember that child.
Remember that prayer chain come through with Sister Louise's grandchild.
Sean, we had on the prayer chain, I believe it was, or maybe Monday or something, for Dave Jarvis. And Jamie said that his cancer had come back. Well, I saw him on Monday, and they were at the cancer center, and he was having treatments. And so pray for him. He really, really needs prayer.
Let's remember the Jarvis family. Yes, remember the Hale family. Yes. Any others? If not, I'm sure we've got unspoken. Just let that be known by raising your right hand. And again, the altar's open, so if anybody would like to come up and gather around, and we'll have prayer. And Scotty, would you care to lead us, brother?
Okay, I think that'll work. Let's see. I was going to read scripture that really spoke to me this morning. It's from Psalm 66, verse 10 through 12. It said, "For you, O God, have tested us. You have refined us as silver is refined. You brought us into the net. You laid afflictions on our backs. You've caused men to ride over our heads. We went through the fire and through the water, but you brought us out to rich fulfillment." Rich fulfillment. That's what I'm believing for. And I believe that. I believe that with all my heart because, you know, the fire, it hurts. And but He will take that and He will use that for our good to refine and perfect our faith. Because without our faith, we have nothing. So I'm believing in the word of the Lord that we will have rich fulfillment. I need to switch that. There we go. I come, God, I come, return to the Lord, the one who's broken, the one who's torn me apart. You strike down to bind me up. You say you do it all in love, that I might know you in your suffering. Though you slay me, yet I will praise you. Though you take from me, I will bless your name. Though you ruin me, still I will worship, sing a song to the one who's all I need. My heart and flesh may fail, the earth below give way, but with my eyes, oh, with my eyes, I see the Lord lifted high upon that day. Behold the Lamb that was slain, and I'll know every tear was worth it all. Oh, though you slay me, yet I will praise you. Though you take from me, oh, I will bless your name. Though you ruin me, still I will worship, sing a song to the one who's all I need. belong to the one who's all I need. He's all we need. He's it.
I tell you, my sister takes care of me. She knew I was going to be up here sweating. Good evening. Quick shout out. See here. Real quick shout out to, we got a birthday. See, Nathan, I didn't even have to say a word, brother. I appreciate you. Got a birthday. I went over this evening when I got here, was telling Ron happy birthday. And Nathan said, ask him how old he is. I told Nathan, I said, well, once we pass 30, we quit asking. We just roll with it, don't we, brother? Ron, we appreciate you, brother. I know I've said this before, but a lot of you all probably don't know half of what Ron goes through here at this church to put up with a lot of us and asking and doing and stuff we do and telling him later after we've done it. And it's a handful, but he is a blessing for our church, and I hope you catch his devotions because his anointing and his devotions and his teaching is wonderful. So we appreciate you, brother. Love you. Lamentations chapter 2 is where we're going to go tonight. Pastor a couple weeks ago done the introduction, kind of the background and context and leading up to it, and then Jay followed up Sunday night with chapter 1. The bad thing sometimes about being with the youth group is I had to go back and watch both of them, and for me it's harder to watch and listen and write notes. And John, would you care to turn this down just a tad maybe? It's hard to go back for me to write notes. I feel like I need to be in here and doing that, but both of those done great. And Jason mentioned something the other night when he started on his that I was watching, and he said it's easy for us when TJ does the background and the context, everything kind of makes it easier for us, and it does. But I was telling Pastor last night, we were talking on the phone, and I was telling him out of all the years of teaching, this may have been like one of my hardest studies. I don't know, it was just the way, maybe I've not studied the Lamentations enough and really dug into it and tried to learn it, but really going and cross-referencing and looking at a lot of things. And man, this is a powerful chapter. The whole book is, but this chapter is a very powerful chapter, and I hope the Lord will let me bring out some things tonight, and I don't make a big mess out of it. If it's anything comes out that you all learn anything, it'll be from him. The rest that's a mess and confusing will come from me. So Lamentations, and so real quick, let's don't spend a lot of time on it, but real quick, all the way back from the start, a couple weeks ago, Pastor said, we're going to touch on a little bit of these Lamentations. So what does Lamentations mean? What is it? Crying out, laments, right? Anything else? Anything else? Eulogies? Dirge? I was waiting on that one. Right, so it's talking about the crying out. And Pastor went back, and I'm not going to go back to those scriptures, but he brought out the scriptures that who was the prophet that had mentioned Lamentations before? Jeremiah. See, I tried to help you cheat. But he was the weeping prophet, right? Known as the weeping prophet. And this is an eyewitness account. And you're really going to look at some eyewitness account tonight in chapter 2. So we want to look here at chapter 2, and we're really going to see, you're going to see the Lord's anger, right? We've been talking a little bit, even through Habakkuk and the things that had went on there, and the pastor's been preaching on in his series. But here, really, when you see this invasion, and he kind of talked a little bit about the first night of opening up into this, but tonight you're really going to start to see, you're going to see the eyewitness account of just how disappointed or angry and fiercely angry that the Lord was about the things that were going on. And you're actually going to see, you're going to really look and see this fall here. You're going to see the fall of this city through Jeremiah's eyes. But the first part of these scriptures, that's like 1 through 9, 1 through 10, you're going to kind of see that from the Lord's perspective. You're going to see exactly what he was doing and what happened. And then you're going to see Jeremiah's perspective. You're going to see his point of view, or I think Pastor called it the human element, the human perspective. So he's brought this out, and I wanted to make sure I hit this because this is something you're definitely going to see tonight. This whole thing is a consequence of Israel's sin, right? And so he's talked about, and we've been leading up to this, that disobedience brings disastrous consequences, right? Obedience brings what? Obedience brings blessings. Disobedience brings disastrous consequences. And they have been violating their covenant with God. Very important that you remember this. We're going to look at that too. And then also that God will suffer when his people will suffer. Okay, so that's some of the things we're going to look at. So, chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. And I'm going to read some of these, and then we'll go back and kind of look at them. Let me just read through them. Let's see. Yeah, I better read through them so we can kind of go on. It's kind of I don't want to be too long, but so verse 1, chapter 2. How hath the Lord covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud in his anger, and cast down from heaven unto the earth the beauty of Israel, and remembered not his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord hath swallowed up all the habitations of Jacob, and hath not pitied. He hath thrown down in his wrath the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He hath brought them down to the ground. He hath polluted the kingdom and the princes thereof. Verse 3, he hath cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. He hath drawn back his right hand from before the enemy. He burned against Jacob like a flaming fire, which devoureth round about, everything around it. He hath bent his bow like an enemy. He stood with his right hand as an adversary, and he slew all that were pleasant to the eye of the tabernacle of the daughter of Zion. He poured out his fury like a fire. Verse 5, the Lord was an enemy. He hath swallowed up Israel. He hath swallowed up all her palaces. He hath destroyed his strongholds, and hath increased in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. We're going to see that tonight. And he hath violently, verse 6, he hath violently taken away his tabernacle as if it were a garden, and hath destroyed his places of the assembly. The Lord hath caused the solemn feast and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion, and hath despised in the indignation of his anger the king and the priest. I'm going to stop right there, and then we'll go on down in a minute. So, first thing I put up here that you see that we're talking about, when he begins to talk about that, he's talking about what? He's talking about the tabernacle. You see that right where I stopped in verse 6. And he violently taken away the tabernacle or the temple. This was their symbol of safety. This was the place that had meant so much to these people. All the way back to Exodus, right? And we've talked about the tabernacle before and how it was built and how it was designed and everything had to be to a certain thing. This was their meeting place, right? This is where they met God. This is where they went to Him. This is their place of safety that had meant so much to them, and now it's taken away. At this point, it's taken away. So verse 3, I want to start here. He hath cut off his fierce anger, cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. Psalm 75. Let's look right here just a second. You don't have to flip over. I'll read it. But Psalm 75, it says this. The earth and all the inhabitants thereof are dissolved. I bear up the pillars of it. I said unto the fools, deal not foolishly, and to the wicked, lift not up the horn. Lift not up the horn on high, speak not with a stiff neck. So when you see of an exalted horn, or the lifting up the horn, it's the kind of the same of a big proud bull. And he's got horns on his head and he's lifting them up. There's a part of arrogancy there. There's some arrogancy and some confidence, which is exactly what a lot of these people at that time where they were at. And they begin to lift themselves up, right? They were breaking this covenant with God. And in that, he's cutting that off. He's saying the arrogance, everything that you're lifting up, done. It's over, no more. And you'll see what that turns into here in just a little bit. He goes on down here in verse 3 and he talks about this flaming fire. That epitomizes exactly just how fierce God's anger was. Just how fierce. We cannot stress that enough when you're looking at this, of just how upset and how broken that this country had become, these people had become, and just how upset that had made God. Let's look here at this covenant that they've broken. Exodus chapter 23. I got it on here somewhere. So Exodus chapter 23, and I've got some of them on here, but I'm going to read on down. So if we start at verse 20, this is when they are coming out. They're going to the promised land, right? And you remember what God always done. He always provided a way. God always brought them food. He always brought them water. He always had a cloud of fire or a pillar of a cloud or fire, whatever it would be, to guide them day and night. He always provided and he always guided them. And then this is what he does here in Exodus 23. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in thy way, to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him. It means pay attention to him. Respect him. Listen to him. Obey his voice, he says in verse 21. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions. Okay? For my name is in him, is what the Lord said. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries. So he begins to make this covenant with them right here. And he says, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I have promised you a place, and I'm going to take you there. I'm going to provide a way. I'm going to protect you. Remember, I call them remember all the Hittite? That's what I always call them. The Amorites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, all those that they all went through battle with all the time. What did God do every single time? They defeated them without using their own hands. Just because God's hand was in it. Look here, he goes on down here in the very next verse. For mine angel shall go before thee, and bring thee into the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, Canaanites, the Hivites. I will cut them off, God said. The same thing he had just promised them. You have a covenant with me, and as long as you obey my voice, your enemies will be my enemies. Your adversaries will be my adversaries. But when you turn away from that and you begin to break that covenant, I will withdraw my hand. I will take my hedge of protection down. I will bring forth my wrath. It won't be pardoned. He's telling them that from day one. Okay? There's some more there. I'm going to read just a little bit more. You shall serve the Lord your God, in verse 24. Well, let me start here. They shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do their works, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them, and quite break down their images. Ye shall serve the Lord your God, you shall bless the bread and the water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. They had all these things at their hand through this covenant with God. But when you get into Lamentations, you begin to see that they had broken this covenant with God, and he begins to remove their hand. And you're going to see exactly what goes on here. Verse 4 and 5, we read this just a second ago, back in Lamentations 2. He hath bent his bow like an enemy. Picture that. I wished I would have brought mine. But, you know, when you picture a bow, an Indian pulling his bow back, what you call on the ends of it where the strings are tied, it's called a limb. Those are limbs, and those limbs would bend back. And that's what he's talking about. He had bent his bow, but it means he was stretching back with everything he had, that when he let it go, it was coming just as fast as it could. It wasn't going to be something that was going to come easy, but when it was coming with force, and it was coming with deadly force and deadly consequences. He says he's bent his bow like an enemy. He stood with his right hand as an adversary. Was God an enemy with them? Not necessarily that he had made them an enemy or that he was their enemy, but he had removed his hand to allow the enemy to come in. Is exactly what he was doing here. And in verse 5 he says this, he says the Lord was an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all her palaces. He hath destroyed his strongholds, and he hath increased the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. God says, he says, I've allowed this. I'm the one that has brought this. Because of, go back to the key point. What was one of the key points from day one when Pastor started this? It was disastrous, or disobedience brings what? Disastrous consequences. And that's exactly what they're getting ready to see here. Watch how personal it begins to get. He's began to destroy the city. The bow is bent back. He's coming with force. Now look how very personal it is when it says that he goes to the tabernacle. Verse 6 through 9. Well, let me just read it. He hath violently taken away his tabernacle, verse 6, as if it were a garden. He hath destroyed his places of assembly, the place where they gathered. The Lord hath caused the solemn feasts and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion, and hath despised in the indignation of anger the king and the priest. Verse 7 says, the Lord hath cast off his altar, and hath abhorred his sanctuary. He hath given up into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. It means it's all begin to fall to the enemy. He says, they have made a noise in the house of the Lord as in the day of the solemn feast. The Lord hath purposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. He has stretched out a line. He hath not withdrawn his hand from destroying. Therefore he made the rampart, the wall to lament. And they languish together. Verse 9, her gates are sunk into the ground, and he hath destroyed and broken her bars. Her king and her princes are among the Gentiles. The law is no more. Her prophets also find no vision from the Lord. He actually asked, going back and watching Pastor's first night, he actually asked when he got to that verse the first night, what did that mean to you? What kind of vision, what kind of picture did your mind get when you see her gates are sunk into the ground and have destroyed her broken bars? As the tabernacle begins to be torn down. Let's back all the way up here to verse 7 for just a minute. But this is, when he begins to talk about this, and I talked about this being the place that they gather, and it's where they would meet God, but not only did he get their dwelling places, but he got their strongholds, their places of safety, and the places of defense, places that they could take comfort in or take safety in. And he begins to destroy that. But see, the tabernacle was even much more to God. How important was the altar? If you begin to think about the altar, the tabernacle, you begin to think of the places that they offered their sacrifices, places that they brought their gifts, places that they offered and sanctified their gifts, and the place that they would feast with the Lord. All that is gone, taken in one moment. One moment at the bend of a bow, because of their disobedience, it's taken away all of this. And it's very, very, how personal was the tabernacle? How personal was it? Think of everything that was stored in the tabernacle and how it was built and designed, even going into the Holy of Holies. And what's in the Holy of Holies? Anybody? What's one of the things that's in there? What did they carry with them all the time? The Ark of the Covenant. And all the things that's inside of it. And look what has happened here to this special place, not only to them, but of the God. How fierce was his anger for that to happen. It tells you exactly what kind of consequences come from disobedience. Let's go on down here. Let's look here when Jeremiah starts to talk about just exactly what's happened to him. Verse 10, The elders of the daughter of Zion, they sit upon the ground and they keep silence. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. Let's do about 2 verses or 3. The elders of the daughter of Zion, they sit upon the ground and keep silence. They have cast up dust upon their heads. They have girded themselves with sackcloth. The virgins of Jerusalem hang down their heads to the ground. Let's stop and then I'll go on to 11. Verse 10, you see the outward visibility of grief. You see it personally upon them. They cast the dust upon them. They're sitting on the ground. We're talking about the elders, the leaders are on the ground. Everything's gone. It's destroyed. And you see this outward wounding that they have taken. The leaders, very, very important. And I come home this evening. We went up to Don's visitation today, and I come back this evening, and I started to study this, and I turned on his service, and I began to watch it, and they played a clip of Don speaking here just recently, a few months ago. And he's holding up the Word of God, and he says, you know what, if I'm not in the truth, I can't share the truth. You won't get anything about it. If I don't walk it, it doesn't do me any good to try to talk it. That's the easiest way for me to put it. And he shared that scripture. It says, be ye holy, for I am holy. Right? We can't live outside of this and expect to reach people. Very important leaders of Mount Olive Church. Their elders, their leaders were sitting on the ground, covered in dust, and they were silent. Their disobedience to God had brought a great wrath and fierce fire among their nation and among their people. It is so important that we, as leaders, find ourselves to be holy for He is holy, to be living it, to be able to walk it before we try to talk it. Because when we don't, we'll eventually find ourselves, and I'm not talking about necessarily Mount Olive Church, but I'm talking about even this country as a whole. When we begin to not be holy, we'll find ourselves sitting on the ground, silenced and covered in dust. And we'll be grieving, and it was very visible on the outside. So they find themselves broken upon the ground. Now let's go to 11. Look how personal it gets here. Not only on the outward appearance, but let's just look at how much this is devastating. Verse 11, mine eyes do fail me with tears. Mine eyes do fail with tears. You know what that's saying? I've cried so much, I can't cry anymore. So not only is the outward appearance there, the visibility, and you see the grief that they've taken on, but now it's starting to work on the inside. And he says, mine eyes fail me with tears, my bowels are troubled. So he's saying, my very gut. You ever get so sick to your stomach sometimes? You're in such grief and you're hurting so bad that you're tore all to pieces. His health was wrecked, so to speak. The inside impression, let me read the rest of this before I give you that quote. It's on the board. My bowels are troubled. My liver is poured out upon the earth for the destruction of the daughter of my people, because the children of the suckling swoon in the streets of the cities. Even the children were going and they were fainting in their mother's laps because they began to starve to death and there was a great famine. Everything was taken away. The inside impressions are greater than the outward expressions. Sometimes we see outward expressions of grief, right? But it's the part that you don't see that Jeremiah begins to describe that's on the inside that says, I was totally sick to my stomach. I had cried and I had wept so much, there were no more tears left in me, and my eyes began to quit working. I couldn't see. Psalm 6 and 7, it says, my eye is consumed by grief. Meaning, you've wept till you can't weep anymore. There is a picture there that really demonstrates the devastation and exactly just how fierce the anger of the Lord was here. He goes on down there and he says, even the children because the children, the sucklings, swoon in the streets of the city. Verse 12 says, they say to their mothers, where's the corn and the wine? Where's the food, Mom? Where's the food? Where's the drink? When they swooned as the wounded in the streets of the city, it says the children became like wounded soldiers. Is exactly what that's saying, that had been in battle. It's like they were laying on the streets like they were wounded soldiers. It says when their soul was poured out into their mother's bosom, which means it was over. As they began to lose their life, as life began to leave them, and they would fall out in their mother's lap, in their bosom, to be able, for their mom to be able to hold them. And these children were going away. What thing shall I take to witness for thee? What thing shall I liken to thee? What shall I equal to thee? In verse 13, that I may comfort thee. Let me jump down here to 15. Verse 15 in chapter 2 says, all that passed by clapped their hand at thee. That means those that were outside that nation, those that come in to destroy things. As they would walk by and they would see children dead in their mother's bosom, laying in the streets. They seen the elders covered in dust, sick to their stomach by everything that had went on in their lives, and they couldn't move. As they would come by, they would clap at them. And they begin to laugh at them, and they begin to mock. All that passed by clapped their hands at thee. They hiss and wag their head at the daughter of Jerusalem, saying, is this the city that men call the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? Oh, you remember when I told you earlier the exalted horn and it was cut off? See, their horn was lifted up, that they thought they were just the greatest city. They thought they were above everything else. That was the most beautiful place. And as they began to destroy their city, they would come by and they would clap and they would laugh and they would hiss and they would go on and they would say, oh, this must be the big perfect city. This is the place. They were mocked, they were gloated, and they were laughed at. That is how much can happen from the consequences of disobedience. God, listen, church, we look at God and we share God like He is a God of love. Absolutely. And my 99.9% of the time, if I'm ever telling anybody about my God and what He is, I'm telling them a story of love. You're the same way. We're sharing a story of love. Let me tell you what God has done in my life. Let me tell you what God has done in those around me. I thought back to the pastor's message this past Sunday and talking about remembering the works, right? Habakkuk said, remember the works and your performance in the past. And when he shared that so many times, but a lot of times we fail to remember, even as Christians, for no matter how long we've been saved, God is a God of love. And it is unmatched like any other love we will ever know or ever experience. But we better be sure and we better know that He is also a God of wrath when it comes to disobedience. He is for sure a God of wrath. That is what makes Him a just God. That is what makes Him a just God. It's not just the love, but it's the wrath on sin itself. They were laughed at. I've got to go on here. They were laughed at. So they said the perfection of beauty, the most beautiful city, is no more. And then it goes on down here. It says, all thine enemies has opened their mouth against thee. They hiss and they gnash their teeth. They say, we have swallowed her up. We've taken the city. We've defeated you. The big, beautiful place, the perfect city. We've took it all. It says, certainly, in verse 16, this is the day that we looked for. We have found and we have seen it. So as they come in and they destroy everything, they said, all along, you've been lifted up. You've been better than us. It's the big, beautiful city. And we have longed for the day you've defeated everybody else up to this point. All the Amorites, the Hittites, Perizzites, all that. You've defeated every bit of it. And God's hand has been upon you. And we have longed for the day that we could come in here and tear the walls down. And today is the day. We've done it. Now picture that with Jeremiah sitting back and seeing what's going on. And he begins to see the city fall, the elders in the streets, the children are beginning to die. That's not enough that everybody that comes by begins to mock and gloat and laugh. He was sick. He was so sick from what had been going on. The Lord hath done that which he hath devised. He hath fulfilled his word, verse 17. And he hath commanded in the days of old. He hath thrown down and hath not pitied. He hath caused thine enemy to rejoice over thee. He hath set up the horn of thine adversaries. Wow. It got cut off from them, right? But he has exalted this one. The adversaries now, they're lifted up. Now they've got a little bit of arrogance. They're beginning to gloat. Verse 18, their heart cried unto the Lord, O wall of the daughter of Zion, let tears run down like a river day and night. Give thyself no rest. Let not the apple of thine eye cease. Arise, cry out in the night in the beginning of the watches. Pour out thine heart like water before thee. The face of the Lord, lift up thy hand toward him. For the life of the young children, they faint for hunger in the top of every street. I'm going to finish up right here. Last 3 verses. So we've went through the Lord's perspective and exactly what he was doing and exactly what his anger was. And then we've went through Jeremiah's perspective and we've seen exactly what he's seen and just how devastating it was to everyone there and even to him. We see the tears rolling. You can picture the tears rolling down Jeremiah's face and him being so upset and so broken. But now let's look at the prayer and look at what he says in verse 20. Behold, O Lord, and consider. Think about that word just a minute. Consider. Stop, Lord, and look. He's asking him to consider this. When you ask someone to consider, you're like, hear me out. Is exactly what Jeremiah's saying. Behold, O Lord, listen, O Lord, and consider. Hear me out. To whom thou hast done this. Look at who you've done this to. Look at who we are. Who have you ever done this way? Shall the woman eat their fruit and children of a span long? Do you know what had happened right there? The mothers had turned into cannibals. They had begun to eat their own young, their own fruit, their own children. They had begun to eat their flesh. That's how bad things were. Get a good picture of just how devastating this was from the Lord's anger. Then he says in verse 21, the young and the old, they lie on the ground in the streets. My virgins and my young men are fallen by the sword. Thou hast slain them in the day of thine anger. Thou hast killed and not pitied. Lord, it's not, just consider this. Think about this for just a minute. It's not even bothered you to do this. When God's dealing with sin and when God's wrath is poured out, he doesn't have to be bothered about anything. He's justified. He's fine with what he's doing. Verse 22, last verse, he says, Thou hast called as in a solemn day my terrors round about. So that in the day of the Lord's anger none escaped nor remained. Everything was gone. It's all gone, Lord. Consider that. Think about what's happened. Those that I have swaddled and brought up, those that I have brought up, those that I have cared for, those that I have taught, those that I have discipled, those that I have trained, those that I have tried to mentor, every bit of that, all of that is gone at that time. We'll finish with this. A lot of times, and I know I talked earlier about where we need to be as leaders. But listen, not only, it's easy for us to say, a lot of times it's easy for us to throw our leaders, even of our own country, our own states, our own counties, it's easy for us to throw them under the bus. If our leaders don't turn to God, listen, If the Christians ain't doing what we're supposed to be doing, it's never going to reach them. It's never going to reach them. It's got to start with us. It's got to start with us. We have to be holy, for thou is holy. We have to be able to walk in the truth before we can speak the truth to anyone else. But we have to know. We have to know. No matter what. Share your stories of love. Share what God has done with you. But we have to know, and we can't forget as Christians, that God is just and He is a God of wrath. And His anger against sin is like a fiery fire. It will come with a fierce and as a bow bent back to come fast and come quick and to be devastating when it does. Okay? I hope and pray you all got a nugget out of that chapter somewhere, because I feel like it was the hardest thing for me to study this. I don't know why. But does anybody have anything? Okay, any announcements? Okay, anybody wants to go to Buchanan County Saturday to work on the cleanup and things that they're doing over there, home mission trip, please let Sister Stephanie know by Friday evening. Okay? Okay, anybody wants to donate those items, you can leave them here at the church in the lobby, and they'll get those and make sure they get over there. Which one of you guys is preaching Sunday? You both pointing at each other. Y'all may get double trouble Sunday morning. Pastor Jay, Sunday morning. So remember him. Any other announcements? I feel like I was supposed to tell y'all something I can't remember now. Okay. Nothing else, let's all stand. Brother Carmel, will you dismiss us?